Hi, this is Phillip Shoemaker, and you're listening to the What is Crypto podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the What is Crypto podcast with your boy, Michael.nye. Today, Michael's talking about identity with two pioneers of the industry, Mr. Vinny Lingham of Civic and Mr. Phillp Shoemaker of Identity. And in this conversation, they're going to talk about what is identity. Who are you? I mean, you can go deep and say, I am whoever I say I am. But even if you say you are who you are, how do you prove that you are who you are? Well, that's what our ID cards are for, and that's what our government gives us. But is it solely up to our government of who we are and how we prove who we are? And what if the government says we are nobody? Then are we nobody? And do you want to give that power to a centralized system, say a server, a government, a legal entity? Well, Vinny and Phillip are here to talk about not only what is identity, how do you know who you are, and how can you prove who you are to everybody, but also what are the systems that are being developed to make sure that you and only you are in control of who you are. Before we get into that conversation, please go to whatiscrypto.com. There you can subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you could sign up and subscribe to the podcast itself on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or anywhere else you listen to this podcast. Remember, this podcast is only for entertainment and only for educational purposes. So don't run and buy Civic or any other token that you hear on this podcast just because they come on the show. And lastly, do us a favor. Please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Give us a review and a rating. It means the world to us, and it keeps us making these shows and helps people find the show so people can get this great information that we're putting out. Now, let's get into it. Here's your boy, Michael.nye, Vinny Lingham, and Phillp Shoemaker.
What's going on, Vinny? How you doing, man?
Hey, man. All good. How's life?
Good, man. Things are good. Can you just start off by sharing who are you and what's your title? Like, what are you working on?
So I'm Vinny Lingham. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Civic Technologies. And, we run Civic.com, and actually we run Identity.com at the moment as well. And it's a decentralized identity marketplace platform, and using smart contracts and tokens to try to rid the world of the one world government or evil company that takes everyone's information and puts it in a single database. We've created distributed architecture, so your ID information sits on your device and your device only, unless you share it or choose to, and you become the center of your own universe. And when we look at where the world's going today, we think that there's a lot of risks with highly centralized databases and people's information. So
Love that. Awesome, Phillip. Glad to have you on the show today. Can you just start off by giving your full name and title for us?
Yeah, my name is Phillp Shoemaker, and I'm the executive director of Identity.com.
Awesome, man. And how would you describe yourself?
That's a tough one, but for me, it's being a constant learner. I do strongly believe that when you stop experiencing new things, when you stop learning, you become irrelevant or you die. So for me, it's all about learning. Always be learning.
Diving into the meat of it, we're going to talk a little bit about identity today. Can you give us a good description of identity? What does it even mean?
Identity is a way that you're able to uniquely identify yourself to other people. Now, typically what this means for most of us is it means government forms of ID. That's what we were born into. That's how we were raised. But it can be anything we want it to be. On our platform, Identity.com, it's all about people that can validate you are who you say you are. I can validate that is your Bitcoin address. I can validate that is your email address. If there are people out there to be able to validate that you are who you say you are, now you have to be trusted. But to me, identity is all about being able to uniquely identify yourself. And as of now, we're still forced to use government forms of ID.
What is identity to you?
that's a very difficult question because I think that's the whole point. Identity is different for everyone, right? What is it for me? I think for me, identity is the sum total of things which I believe to be true about myself, which others are willing to attest to a large extent, right? So that's what I think. It's like, even if I think that, like, for example, if I said I am a spiritual angel from another dimension and no one else believes me, I can argue that's my identity, but I just don't think that that's realistic in the real world, right? So, like how I would position it would be, you've got to have, because the problem with what is your identity, anyone can believe whatever they want. It doesn't mean it is true. So, like, what do you believe about yourself that is provably true? And that I think is what identity, because when you think about, like, well, and the reason you say, well, why does it have to be true? It's like, well, if it's not provably true, or no one else will believe it, how can I use it in society? And identity, I think, is something, from my perspective, something you can actually use in society today. It's not something which you could be delusional about. I mean, it has to be true.
Would you encompass like someone saying, for example, myself, if I said I'm a musician, would that be encompassed in an identity, or would that just be more of a description of who I am?
Well, that's a really good point, because for many of us, that is an identity. I'm an engineer, right, by trade, and a user interface designer. I like to be identified as such, but that can represent so many other people in the world. And so for me, it's a factor. It's a product of all of these attributes that make Michael who he is and make Phillip who I am. And so to me, it's a variety of things. And absolutely, if you put all those together, you can ultimately form an identity based on that. But for now, right, we're still stuck with these old school paper forms of ID.
And what are some of the current problems that we see with identity in its present form?
In its current form, identity is cumbersome. Every time you go to a doctor, you've got to fill in all the forms again. Every time you go and apply for an account or a mortgage application or credit card or whatever, you have to give all your identity information over every single time. I think everyone's frustrated by this. I mean, I don't know about you, but like filling in forms and handing over information is one of the most painful things I can do. And even in the digital world, you go to a new website, you have to fill in all the forms again, you have to give all your information. It's time consuming and it's painful. And I just love a world where identity is captured in one area and you can just reuse it. So reusable identity, I think, is a solution to the problems we face, where people don't have to, constantly have to fill in forms and hand over identity and have to prove who they are. I mean, like, you open up an exchange account at a crypto exchange, you have to like fax in your passports or email your passports and holding up a sign saying this is me. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So I think identity today is cumbersome, and we need to make it frictionless over time.
It's interesting that you say that. It's kind of sad that I have to say this, but it's kind of what Facebook did with the login feature on other social media platforms and things like that. It really simplified
Yeah.
it.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that, and that's why Facebook's so used. I mean, people use it because it's simple and easy. The fact that they keep the data and use it is a different story. But, like, and we've built something similar. We built Chainauth, which is effectively decentralized login. So same as what Facebook offers, but we don't store the data you do. But getting adoption for that is tough, right? Getting sites to accept it is difficult because we don't have a user base like Facebook. So even though we may have a view of like, well, we're not going to use your data, sell your data, and own your data, you can. It doesn't matter, because we still need to get adoption from websites and services that are willing to adopt a service that has fewer users. Unfortunately, Facebook wins in that regard. Like, they have just the sheer volume of users they have means that they can offer a service that has a lot of users, even though the outcome may not be, entirely desirable. Yes.
Yeah, where do I start? I mean, I feel our current identity system is broken. Anyone with access to personal information can use it. Identity documents are easy to forge, and that's a problem, especially with these synthetic IDs that are popping up now, where people are using a real social security number and a name, and then starting to build credit on that, and it could be from a 6-year-old boy. And so for me, this is really broken. And one of the other issues is with paper identifications, they're easily lost, but not easily replaced. And if you're one of the millions of people in the world that are being trafficked, human trafficked, they often do this by acquiring your paper documentation and never giving it back to you. So you're beholden to them. You're in indentured servitude. You're forced to work for them until they give you your IDs back. Digital IDs can help combat this. You and I, we use our IDs everywhere, all the time, and we don't even bat an eye at it. At least I didn't used to. But I have a 15-year-old daughter, and when she goes away to college in a few years, and she shows her ID to complete strangers just to get into a bar, that scares the hell out of me, or a club. All they really need to know is she of legal age to come into this establishment? They don't need to know her name. They don't need to know her ID, her address, none of this stuff, right? They don't need to have access to it. And so this is one of these things that really interested me, was this idea of self-sovereign identity. You choose who gets to see it and what they get access to. The bar only needs to know, are you of legal drinking age? And they need to know you are the person who's bearing the ID. So they need to have your face, picture of you. You're standing right in front of them with an ID, and they need to know, are you of age or are you not? It's a thumbs up, thumbs down situation. This is the basis of self-sovereign identification, or SSI. And lastly, when you do show IDs at many places, they record them. And then they store them in these honeypots. And as we all know, this is a doozy because people love to go after honeypots. Companies are collecting large amounts of data, and they just leave them open. If you know the California market here really well, cannabis is a big thing right now. And California law requires every one of these dispensaries to create honeypots of everybody that comes into that place. They record your ID and they store it in a database. Now, I don't know if you've been to many of these dispensaries, but what do they really know about protecting my identity and protecting this data? They're not Amazon, they're not Apple, they're not people who make a living protecting data. They're there to grow and sell cannabis. And while I applaud that, at the same time, I don't feel safe. So California is forcing all these dispensaries to create honeypots, whereas if we had digital IDs and other forms of ID, there wouldn't be honeypots, there'd just be references to the blockchain. And that to me is a much better world.
I agree. I like that example that you gave about your daughter. Run me through, what are some of the possible solutions to like that specific scenario?
One of the interesting things about digital IDs is it means we have to change the infrastructure. Right now, it's pretty easy for a bartender to look at your ID, give it back to you, and pour you a drink. It's a simple, just glance at the paper or at the document. With digital forms of ID, you need to have a little more infrastructure. There needs to be some sort of internet connection. There needs to be a way to scan a QR code or something. So the way I envision this working, and the way we've seen it work in things like vending machine and bars that we support, is you go up to the bartender and you just simply scan a QR code that's right there on the counter. And the bartender, it pops up on their system, shows a picture of you, and with a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a red X or a green check mark that says, yes, this person is of legal drinking age. It's such a simpler way. All they need to do is glance at you, glance at the photo, say, yep, that's you, and we approve it. And to me, this is such a compelling use case, because all you're getting from the consumer standpoint is you're scanning this QR code and immediately it pops up on your phone and says, hey, this bar wants to know if you're of legal drinking age. Do you accept this? This is the only information they're going to get. And you can say yes or no at that point. If you say no, of course, you have to exit the bar. But if you say yes, then it gives them a green check mark and you're free to drink. It opens up new use cases as well, such as, like I said earlier, vending machines. Alcohol vending machines or other age-gated vending machines are something that's a real compelling future that we didn't really have the ability to do before we have digital IDs.
What are some different ways that we can prove our identity? Right now we have facial recognition, fingerprints, location-based witnesses. What are some of these ways, and kind of how do they work?
Obviously, you have to have paperwork, right? So you're scanning a driver's license, etc. You got to have all those things in place, and from that, call it paperwork, I think you can prove that you are who you say you are, and that's just typically government issued documentation. So we are who the government says we are, in a sense.
What are some of the things that you're specifically working on in this realm? To talk to us a little bit more about like your venture and what you've built. And one, why is this important issue to you? And two, I want to hear about what you've built to solve this.
Absolutely. My background, I've been at 7 startups in my career. My most recent company before I jumped into the blockchain realm was at Apple, where I built the App Store and helped run it for 7 years. Now, in building the App Store, we had to vet every app that went onto the store. We had to ensure that they weren't violating any of the guidelines, that there wasn't child pornography, that there wasn't pornography, period. But child pornography is a doozy. And issues like that. A lot of the issues were mundane. Was Apple getting their 30% cut? But some were really bad. It was bullying apps, things that would steal your information, and stuff along those lines. And so for me, in doing the App Store, I found so many developers doing shady things that we would terminate their agreement with Apple so they can't put another app on the store. But you know what would happen? That app would appear on the store in a matter of days. And they do this because of the lack of real identity checks that are being done. If you want to create an individual account at Apple to put stuff on the App Store, you just need a username and you need to pay $99, or an email address and pay $99. That's pretty much all it is. There's no KYC, there's no identity check, there's no checking of business documents unless you go into to Apple as a business. If you're going in as an individual, submit as many apps as you want. And if you get terminated, you just pop up again under a different email address. You just have to pay another $99. And so for me, when I left Apple, I got the review times down to 24 hours. My wife and I quit. We moved to the Dominican Republic just to kite surf. And we did that for a while, but friends kept visiting that kept talking about blockchain. And it was then that I realized that blockchain would be a great use for identity. And I stumbled upon Civic and Vinny Lingham, and Vinny and I got to chatting. And next thing you know, he asked me to spin out the marketplace, which to me was the most compelling piece, but to spin it out into identity. And so for me, that's how I got into the identity space, is seeing this real need that we had from a business standpoint. And the more I looked at it, I started seeing these issues, like me showing my ID to anybody who asks. Any official that asks, I show my ID, my passport, etc. And to me, that's not great, especially talking to my wife, talking to my daughter about it, and the creepy things men do to get to know a cute girl is just bizarre to me. So I want to be able to protect people, and this was a way protecting businesses, but at the same time protecting individuals.
And what are the innovations that Civic is making in this field?
Look, we're trying to build the underlying technology. I don't think we're in a position where we will decide how it's used. We're trying to build the secure interface, the layer. We've been building Identity.com for quite a while now, and Identity.com is meant to be an infrastructure solutions platform that people can use to secure their data and to do cheaper, better, simpler ID verification.
Love that.
So we're contributing by building this, and we're also working with standards providers. So we're working with companies that, or at least with part of that, for example, Microsoft Diff. We're working with them to be able to offer industry compliant standards in emerging identity solutions.
And I think the key question to this entire discussion is, how do we get governments and major corporations to use this technology?
You know what? It may just be we have to get to a certain tipping point where the current paradigm just has to die. And I think we may be close, but I don't think we're there yet.
To me, it's all centered around critical mass, getting enough people that desire, that demand, that want this. There are definitely challenges, but there are governments that are slowly coming around to this. So Catalonia is launching the first digital identity in Europe for their citizens, and that's coming, looks like in 2020. And Wyoming is making incredible strides in this space with their blockchain initiatives and working with people like Christopher Allen, who's there. He's known as the father of self-sovereign identity, or the grandfather. I don't know how you look at it, but he's the person that's been documenting and writing about this for so long. He's been working with the state of Wyoming to allow for business credentials to be handled from a decentralized DID perspective. That's a decentralized identifier. And that's a way to make it really easy for a business to confirm their identity, is through these documents. And being able to have the state of Wyoming allow business documents is just the first step, because next they'll go to citizens and residents of Wyoming, and hopefully it'll expand further than that. But in the beginning, governments are the hardest ones to crack here. And even though they are the ones that issue IDs right now, it's one of those things that I think is scary to them, just like currency. Having them adopt a decentralized ID is akin to them having them adopt Bitcoin as their currency, or CVCs from Civic, of course. But to me, it's a big issue. And for me, I think we need to get more and more corporations on board, having people support KYCs in their apps, to use our decentralized ID in their apps to be able to start representing themselves online, and ultimately that'll transfer over to people. The issue about KYC and doing DIDs is that I don't want anyone to get me wrong thinking that I want everything on the internet to be identified. Look, I'm a big believer in freedom of speech and anonymity and pseudonymity. I want that to be out there. I want you to be able to be invisible on the internet as much as possible. But at the same time, when I'm reading a news source or I'm getting an email from a friend, I want to verify they are who they say they are. And having decentralized D, or some way to know that person is who they say they are before I have a conversation. So, for example, a few months back, I get this chat on Facebook from Tyler Winklevoss saying, "Hey, have you ever heard of Bitcoin?" Now, out of the blue, I've known Tyler for years. Out of the blue, I get this chat. It can't be him. Why would he ask me such a stupid question? But people do this all the time. His name was the same. He looked the same. obviously it's just a scam, but how do you immediately identify that that person is who they say they are when they're on the other side of the line? It's difficult. So we need to get this into people's hands and into companies' hands as soon as possible so people can start representing themselves online and we can weed out the bad actors from the good ones.
And speaking of governments, how can all our government issues be solved by a more secure and flexible ID?
I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all answer to that. I think every country is different, every state's different. And so you say government, which government, right? Like Estonia, US government, South African government, it all depends. And I think we just have to get to a point where at least the technology exists so that you can secure identity. I think the most important part for me is decentralization of identity. So, like no one person should store all your data and be, able to get hacked and have your information get out there. That's just looking for trouble. And even if, we're already in a world where your information's been hacked, it's already out there, blah, 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 we know the story. We got to get to a point where even if someone has that information, they actually can't use it because there's no private key associated with that data that validates that that's the true owner of the data. And therefore, if data move from something, instead of being something you know to something you own, like private key, it kind of changes things.
And I'm kind of trying to envision how all this is going to work and how all this is going to function. So let me run a couple last questions by you here.
Sure.
Let's imagine I have a digital ID card. How would I carry that? How would people be able to read that? Is that something that's on the phone, or what do you imagine that will look like?
So, I've got some internal mocks for that. We haven't released them yet, but we kind of have a view of what it would look like. But effectively, it's just a digital identifier that can be used. But that's just a visual representation. The reality is, identity would be information plus keys. So think of it this way: so a piece of information about you plus a private key that you can sign, and there's a hash on the blockchain that says if someone signs this message with this private key, then they must be the owner of that data. That's really what it is. So it's more of a private key rather than a visual representation of what an ID card looks like today.
And what would happen if, let's say, my phone dies or the power goes out in the location where I need to utilize the identity, or I lose my phone or whatever device that I might be carrying that identity on? How would that work? How would I still verify myself?
We haven't solved that problem yet, but presumably if you have a watch, an Apple Watch or a phone, your identity should be one of those things. The no power problem is something which is a little bit further out for us. It's kind of the same with your Tesla, right? If your Tesla battery goes flat in your phone, you can't get into your Tesla unless you're carrying the physical key card. I guess we could issue a physical ID. That would be, be great in the long term, but it doesn't solve the problem.
That makes sense. And how do you verify when, say, you scan, I don't know, I would imagine you would scan a QR code on the phone or something like that. How do you verify it's truly them? How does that system work?
So we use various bits of technology, but primarily we take your driver's license or your passport or your ID, and we have you do a selfie, and we create a face mask of the selfie. We match it to the face mask of the ID, and it has to match. And if it doesn't match, we assume it's not you, and we go through a different process to manually verify. But you've got to match your face with your ID, and we have special scanning software that detects whether the ID is fake or the driver's license fake. So assuming that everything's legit, your face on your document has to match the face. We do a liveness test on your face when you're in front of the camera on your phone.
That was my next question. How would you determine if someone, say, has a fake ID? Like, would fraud be even easier to detect, or would it be more difficult to detect?
I think fraud's obviously always a challenge. We work with the best providers we know in ID verification, document signing, document scanning. We just make sure that we continue improving technology. It's getting better every day. As the cameras get better, we have higher fidelity on being able to look at underlying transactions or underlying documents. And as that improves, we can do better scanning.
Do we need blockchain to make this happen?
I think yes. And I'll tell you why. I mean, what's happening now is that if I go into Bank of America, or I go online, Bank of America, or even Coinbase right now, I have to go through a KYC process where I take a picture of my ID, I submit it, hopefully it's encrypted, through Jumio or whatever services they use, and that gets stored somewhere in Coinbase's servers. And obviously that's a honeypot, but look, Coinbase and Gemini and these places, they work very hard to protect my data, and I'm a big fan of that. But at the same time, I do that for every place I go. I open a loan at Chase, I go to Bank of America, I go to Capital One. I'm doing a KYC check at each one of these places. I have to keep showing my ID. They keep recording it. They keep storing it somewhere. So what's a better way of doing that? These centralized databases are killing us. And from an identity perspective, I'm adding more and more references to my ID out there so people can just hack one of these guys and get to know everything about me and steal my identity. And I've looked at the Equifax hack. My social security number is out there. And so I just keep a close eye on it. But why is that? It's because everybody's storing this information separately. And for me, you need to have it stored in one place, and that's on your own device. I don't want to store it on the blockchain, certainly. I don't want my PII stored on the blockchain because with quantum computers, we're going to be able to hack that, or we're going to be able to decrypt that information over time. So all you want to have up there is an attestation that says, yes, this ID is valid or it's invalid, and here's the location to it. The location is on my device. So anytime somebody wants to check my identity, I'll get notified on my device, and they can't get that information unless I approve it from my device. And so for me, the blockchain is the way to do this. It's a relatively transparent way of redirecting your request to me. And I think blockchain's the only way to do it. The only alternative I see is putting on centralized databases, which you could still do that same redirection, but I think it's more easily hackable. When we have this distributed and decentralized, it's very difficult to hack.
But I think blockchain technology has the best chance of solving this because it's really hard to hack a blockchain. Look, the biggest targets right now in these hacks are actually human error, not technology. People try and it's typical phishing, right? Phishing. What's it? Voice phishing. Like, hey, this is Bob from IT. I need your password to access your machine so I can run a new virus scan on it. Oh, okay, here's my password. Like, people do that. I mean, can you believe it? It happens every single day. And so the human attack vector is still going to always be the weakest.
And how do you think the black market will react to something like this technology? Do you think there's a potential competitor or a potential person in the black market looking at this technology or looking at the potential of this technology and looking at how they can duplicate it for a negative purpose or for their own fraudulent purposes?
Absolutely. I mean, bad guys everywhere. So there's definitely a black market for ID information. We know that already. So they buy it online. And you can buy a social security number for $20. So I guess there must be use cases for it.
I think that kind of wraps up the questions. I appreciate you taking the time and jumping on here with us.
Hey, I really appreciate this.
For you, anytime, buddy.
You're the man, dude.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of What is Crypto? Your boy, Mr. Michael Nye, interviewing two pioneers in the space about identity, Mr. Vinny Lingham and Mr. Phillp Shoemaker. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And in your DYOR, I want you to think and I want you to look. I want you to pull out your ID and look at it. Look at the barcode. Look at the information it says. Look at how it's produced, manufactured, and distributed. And think about all the times that somebody lost their ID. Think about all the times that ID is lost and they try to do something, buy something, go into somewhere, prove who they were, and that little card is lost. Think about who takes that card and who uses it for maybe mischief. Gets a credit card under your name, racks up a big debt. You try to prove that it wasn't you. They go and buy alcohol or other things that they maybe shouldn't be buying, and they get into trouble because maybe they look similar to you and somebody doesn't even look at the card. Think about people who assume other people's ID and do heinous crimes or just fly under the radar. They've already done bad things in the past, but you don't know what they have done because they've changed their identity. And think about everything that Vinny and Phillp said and how this can be more convenient, more secure, more useful, and safer for everyone. And also, think about how we can implement it. How can we help push this technology forward, make it more convenient for us all, safer for us all, and have an ID that's not centralized, that a central authority does not dictate who you are, and if they don't agree with who you are, then you aren't who you are. So in DYOR, think about all of that. Think about the future. Think about how we can help. And I'm looking forward to more episodes of What is Crypto with your boy, Michael Nye. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, subscribe, leave us a comment, and a 5-star rating. It helps people find us when they're looking for great educational crypto content. We'll see you in the next episodes.